Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Bells Must Ring podcast. I am your host, Andrew Rice, here with my usual co host, Arnav Sarkar. Joining us later in the episode to preview Rutgers versus Penn State will be Brian Bennett from the Black Shoe Diaries. But for right now, we have some basketball to talk about. After a disastrous loss to Central Connecticut State, Rutgers went into the Players Era tournament. And no, not to dwell anything that happened over a week ago at this point, but we're talking about a loss that, going into the Players Tournament, era tournament, you can't pinpoint that loss on anything. Like, you got beaten in every single category. And I refuse to believe that Central Connecticut State has more NIL than us. So you can't even pin it on that. They go to the Players Era tournament, get blasted by Tennessee, play Notre Dame in the next game, get blasted in the first half, and then return the favor in the second half and just come up just short, in a game that looked like a pickup game at the end, with all the scrambling for the ball and nobody can get a shot off. It really did look like a pickup game. And then on Thursday, on Thanksgiving, you play your final game of the tournament against UNLV. You look good. You look okay in the first half. You're not winning at halftime. They weren't winning at halftime, but in the second half, they just absolutely ran UNLV off the court. Like, I don't even know how else to describe it. It seems like this team. I wish I had could dissect this team, because I don't know. I don't even really know how to break this down. You play a completely uninspired game against Central Connecticut where you look completely helpless against a team you should beat handily.
Right.
You go to Tennessee and you go play Tennessee in the Players Era, you get romped. I mean, what were we expecting there?
Right.
You play one uninspired half against Notre Dame, and in the second half you come out guns blazing and almost steal the win.
Mm-hmm.
And then in this game, you don't look great in the first half. You're competitive, but you don't look great. And then you just blow them out after halftime, gone, out of the water.
Yeah.
I don't get it. I don't understand. I understand that UNLV was down some Big Ben, and Ogbole, as much as you rag on the guy.
Oh yeah, he played really good yesterday.
He showed up to play. He played.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he had such a size advantage on the glass too that he could just keep attacking them. They couldn't really guard him underneath the basket. His strength, his size, he could just get a push off or not like a push off, but he could just get a basket whenever he wanted to, a dunk, or just using his size to get a layup. He had 21 points, 13 boards, so it was definitely his coming out party. He had a lot of that in the first half alone. He was already, I think, 3 points off from setting his career high just after the first half. So a really good performance from Ogbole. But yeah, they didn't have the size to match him, and that was I think that was one of the main deciding reasons why Rutgers won the game. Obviously, was his performance and his presence down there that they could just keep feeding. And in the second half, then they started running away with this. UNLV just didn't. They just didn't have the answers for the Rutgers offense. I guess going down low to Ogbole, but then even Dylan Grant also stepping up, making some shots as well. He had 17 and 8. Mainly those two, and Tariq Francis had 11 as well. He's been a key performer, pretty consistent performer throughout.
Well, you're forgetting about Darren Buchanan in the second half.
I was about to say he had 15 points. He could really do his thing. He's another player that steps up in the big moments, I feel like. And he's another guy who could score inside and outside. He's, I'd say, a little bit more in the more of an inside scorer. He could definitely hit a three. And then you have Battle on the other hand, who's more of the forward.
Here's another thing. Battle did not play in the second half at all. He did
not
see
it was all Buchanan in the second half yesterday.
That begs the question, and Pikel has said several times that they're still figuring out the rotation. First of all, I don't know how, several games into the season, you're still figuring out the rotation. That's just does
Right.
not make any sense to me. But
Mhm.
he says they're still figuring out the rotation. Does Buchanan move in and bump Battleau? Because Battleau has not looked good. And
Right.
although Buchanan has been inconsistent, would you rather take not good or inconsistent? It's like, you know, pick your poison. But honestly, I'd rather take the gamble with the inconsistent, or at least that's that's what Buchanan has
Mhm.
brought to this team. That inside presence because he attacks the rim too.
Yeah.
He is
Yeah.
not afraid to attack the rim. As much as you might want that 3-point shooter on the outside, as much as I think that they're gonna need one. Maybe it's time for Battleau to start coming off the bench. Zerno has not looked good at all. So,
No.
you know, we
Yeah.
thought over the summer that he was going to be this team's leading scorer, this team's leading shooter, and he has just not looked good, you know?
Right, except for that game, I guess in Tennessee, he had a pretty hot game where he started off with three threes early, and then he ended up finishing 3 for 5 from downtown. So he kind of had that one game that also Buchanan also did pretty well. But yeah, other than that, I mean, he's been very cold. Like he hasn't really even shot it a lot. When he hasn't really made too many of them. So he's kind of been like a non-factor. Maybe good for like a 1 3 a game, if that. So I mean, he hasn't really been anything, that productive. I mean, like, yeah. I mean, it would have been really nice to have, I guess, like a reliable sharpshooter. I think the same thing kind of happened with PJ Hayes that we got him out of the portal and we're expecting him to kind of be that guy for us. But his defense is kind of a liability, and his shots were also just not going in. He also wasn't on the court a lot, so like a lot of different things there. So it seems like we might be seeing something similar with Zerno again, unfortunately. But yeah, I mean Buchanan though I think is definitely a pretty consistent player. And he could definitely attack the rim. He could hit a couple threes too as well. He did hit them, a pair in this one, but he's definitely very good at attacking the basket and scoring. He had 15 off the bench. I mean, yeah, I think you're right because Battle Out didn't even play in the second half. I think I don't even think he scored in this game either. So I mean,
Let me
yeah,
double
so
check that because I think you might be right, actually. Yeah, I think you might
just
be right.
Yeah, I saw the score sheet. He didn't even have a stat. He went 0, 0, and 0 in 10 minutes of game action this game. So and Zerno had 5 minutes. He also didn't have any stats in this one. So it was really just yeah, it was the Agbole show, obviously, the Agbole game, I would say. And then Dylan Grant had 17. Battleau, yeah, he had 0. But really Agbole, Grant, Buchanan were the three main guys, and then Tariq Francis had 11. But Francis can definitely give it a go. I mean, he can hit shots. He could drive to the rim. He's athletic. His quickness and his burst of speed definitely works, and he can run the point as well. So I mean, and then you have Jamichael Davis, of course, too. So I mean, yeah. I mean, I've been seeing a lot of the 2 guard lineup where they have Francis and Davis in at the same time, which could be interesting because Francis is on a little bit of the smaller side, while Jamichael Davis is slightly on the bigger side. Yeah. He ended up having 6 points, 6 assists, and 4 rebounds. So kind of a more versatile, more like attacking guard. While Francis is kind of more like I guess, your speed guy. You could shoot threes from the perimeter. So they're a little bit different, but also in some ways a bit similar. So they've definitely been rolling out that 2 guard, like I would even say like 2 point guard lineup almost, except for I guess one of them can play the shooting guard in that case. And then, yeah, and then Battle Out just didn't really have a great game. But yeah, I think Buchanan should probably be in the starting lineup. And that's the way the minutes looked. It almost looked like, he was like the go-to like small forward in that situation. It was almost like basically Francis Davis, Buchanan, Grant, and then Akbole as the 5. So I mean, I would assume they'd probably go towards that because it really doesn't seem like there's that much contributions elsewhere. Like I saw a lot of Lino Mark, but only 2 points.
Well,
Um,
First of all,
oh,
Lino was
yeah.
doing everything but scoring.
Yeah, he
He
was
was
dribbling
energetic,
around like
attacking the
crazy,
ball.
trying to create. Yeah, he just couldn't get the shots to fall. But even like the layups were just like I don't know. It was just too much on them, and it was just like. But yeah, he was definitely hustling. It was nice to see that. And then same thing with Noeli,
He
who had
got
six
several
points.
steals too. He got a couple steals.
Yeah, he was definitely, like, really active in the game, like, I was like, all the different things that he did, but I guess the shots
I
just aren't falling right
I would
now.
argue again he was less of a non-factor than Battleout because Battleout doesn't really do a lot of that
No, he mainly just kinda
extracurriculars.
stands there and, like, shoots it every once in a while, and, like, he had that hot game against Maine where he had 19 the first half, but other than that, there's been a
He
lot of
didn't
games where
score in the
just
second half. He
exactly,
didn't
yeah, he's a very
score in the
hot and
second half.
cold, like, player where he's mainly just relying on his shot and, I don't really know what else because he's not really the most, like, athletic guy, like, he doesn't tend to drive to the rim that much either, like a Buchanan would, so, yeah, I mean, he's kinda just relying on a few things that he has, and in this game, he had 10 minutes and he went 0, 0, and 0, which, I mean, I don't really know what that says, no rebounds, no assists, no nothing, so it's just like, that wasn't really too promising, especially for a player in the starting lineup. You maybe expect that from like a bench guy, but like from your starter, that's just not really like acceptable.
I don't even know if you would 100% expect that from a bench guy.
Yeah, you'd
Being
expect him to get
honest,
some kind of statistic at least. I mean,
first of all, being honest, at the beginning of the offseason when we were getting all these additions and whatnot, we all thought it. We all thought that Francis was going to be the one that came in here and was essentially a non-contributor because
yeah,
everybody looked at
his
his
size.
not even just his size, but his inefficient shooting at the basket in NJIT. He would
Mm,
get a billion shots. Yes, he had I think it was like
he
19 points a game on
something like
17
that.
shots a game.
Yeah. Yeah, he was like one of yeah, he had a decent amount of points per game. But yeah, like 9 I think it was like 19.2 or something like. But yeah, he had a lot of he took a lot of shots to get there and it was just like and then there was also, him playing that too at NJIT, nowhere near the level of the Big 10. And then, third of all, I mean, like his size was just like he's tiny. Like, I mean, maybe that's okay in the wherever. But it's all transferred really well to the Big Ten. I mean, the guy like I said, he could shoot. Like he's probably one of the best shooters on the team. I mean, his ability to get to the basket and score like crafty finishes. I mean, all of that's there. Like he's just I don't know. It's just he's just quick. He knows how to get a shot off. He knows how to get around people. He could facilitate. Like he's pretty legit. Like the only knock on him now would probably be that he's still probably a little bit undersized for the Big Ten. But I mean, even
Yeah,
then,
it scares me what's going to happen to that backcourt when Big Ten play comes around
I know.
because, oh boy,
Yeah,
they are small.
Jermichael Davis and Tariq France. Yeah, they're both pretty small, but I mean they could both I mean I guess to rhyme it, like, they're both pretty small, but I guess they could ball. But like, but like I mean, I don't know. But I'm impressed with Tariq Francis. He's been one of the best players on the team. Maybe not this game, but overall he definitely has been. He definitely has that ability to get a
I
shot
mean,
off the dribble and get to the rim and shoot and do and play point guard. So I mean I don't know what more you could really ask for from a transfer like that.
11 points is also nothing to sneeze at. It's also not like he was a complete
Yeah,
non-factor in
exactly. It's
this
not like
in
he
this
yeah,
game.
and that's like a lower scoring game for him. Like he usually gives you 15, 20 so far. So I mean,
Also, I like, just what this game puts on film because now I think teams are going to have to game plan for Ogbole. He's
yes.
not a Big Ten caliber center, but he's
Right.
no longer a non-factor. You
Yeah,
know,
he's no longer like, oh, he can't do it. Like, clearly you give him time in the post, and he can score. He can use his body. He can, he can get rebounds. He can do what he's supposed to do, and that definitely showed up against a Vegas team that just didn't have the size to contend with them. Like, frankly, I mean, they just really didn't on the glass. So the Rutgers, Steve Peichel, they realized it. The guards realized it. I think they were even saying on the national broadcast, like, the guards don't like to give up the ball, but they were giving up the ball, sending it inside, and Akbole was getting it, at the rim, and that's what was working, and that's what allowed them to also pull away in the second half, and Grant and Buchanan also came to life and hit some shots for Rutgers as well. So I mean, yeah, it was just really good to see them come out like that in the second half after a rough first half. They were down 30, not 39, 33 at the half, and It didn't look too great. It looked like Vegas, the Rebels they were going to start pulling away with the game, or they started getting some momentum. But then the second half, Rutgers outscored them 47-26, had complete domination.
Yeah.
After a rough, brutal week where they lost to Central Connecticut State, obviously a team that you shouldn't lose to, and especially by the way that they did. On top of that, they got dominated there. Tennessee just absolutely ran them out of the gym, but that's a team that just beat Houston. So I mean that's not any like slouch of an opponent at all. But then Notre Dame as well. I mean they played a bad first half, a good second half wasn't good enough at the end of the day. But yeah, I mean after 3 losses like that, like you want to get back in the win column, which they did against UNLV, and then now they're back in the win column. They have a 5-3 record, but schedule gets tough because next week Big Ten play starts, and they might have gotten the 2 best teams in the entire conference in their opening week before conference play even really gets going until January. But I mean this early stretch of we'll give you guys a couple conference games, like those are the 2 toughest ones probably that they might have all year. I mean they have number 1 Purdue coming to town on Tuesday, and then they go out to number 7 Michigan, who just won the Players Era championship over Gonzaga, blew Gonzaga out. It was like a laugher at halftime. They were just like, I mean, they talking about size. They have 7-footers. They can attack the basket. They can dunk. They have a lot of they can get open shots. They can make a lot of threes. Like they're just a barrage of everything over there. And like that was just something to see against a Gonzaga team that Gonzaga just blew out Maryland the day before that. And then Michigan blows them out by 39, and it's like they're having like a dunk contest because it's just like that, like lopsided. They're just doing whatever they want. And I was just like, my goodness, like this is going to be some start for Rutgers in conference play. I mean, and then Purdue also. I mean, they also won. They beat a really good Texas Tech team, or pretty good, maybe not really good, but number 20 Texas Tech team by 30 points. I think they started finding their groove. They struggle a little bit in some of the earlier games, but not like a ton. They beat Alabama. They beat Texas Tech. So they're definitely still going to be a tough team. They've also played, one of the other, I forget which one, like the Bahamas or one of the other tournaments and won it. So they've
Maybe Maui.
Wait, what?
Maybe the Maui Invitational.
Yeah, it might have. I think it was like the Atlantis one or like one of the other ones actually. But yeah, they've definitely played some like higher up level games. Like they played high majors. They played Alabama this season already. They played Texas Tech, I believe. Yeah, like I said, that was at one of the Feast Week tournaments. This was last Friday, so a little bit earlier. And then this week, well, now they play Eastern Illinois today at 12. So that's probably like just like a home game or something like that. If I, like a bye game against Eastern Illinois, so that should be a.
Oh, I don't think we're in a place to be calling games against those teams bye games. I'm just saying,
No, I mean yeah, I guess you're right. I mean,
we are not in a place to be calling those bye games because apparently,
they're not for us. I guess for other teams, but yeah. I mean, well, Purdue, Eastern Illinois, so they get one more tune-up before they come to New Jersey, I guess. And in the past, number 1 Purdue would be Rutgers would give that team a problem. Like, they beat them, I think, 2 years in a row when they're the number 1 team or something.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, obviously the Ron Harper, his 3-pointer at half court, it's a moment that'll live on in infamy. Then the next year, Cam Spencer's shooting performance, helping them get over them on the road. So and then, but yeah, those, that was in Purdue. So they've definitely given a number 1 Boiler team problems. We'll see if they're still number 1 because the new rankings are going to come out, I think, on Monday. So it could be.
I think Michigan might leapfrog them because not only has Michigan won its ranked games, but it is just straight.
I mean, they're just steamrolled like everybody that they've played. I mean, it's just like I've never like. I mean, yeah, it's just incredible. I mean, they blew out every team that they. It's funny because in the beginning of the season, before that, they beat Wake Forest by 1, TCU by 4, and then Middle Tennessee by 25. So, but then in this tournament, they really just like. They like I don't even know like how to describe it, but they beat SDSU by 40. They beat a ranked Auburn team by 30, a Gonzaga team that also won a couple games, might be in the top 10. They beat them by 40 as well. So people are saying they've never seen the team do that in the tournament 3 separate days, winning by a total margin of 110 points. So they might be the number 1 team. You're right, but I mean Purdue is probably still going to be also up there. they might be the number 2 team. It still might Purdue might be 1 and Michigan might be 2. It's going to be that kind of stretch for Rutgers. But the week, I guess it's the next week. But the game against Seton Hall is the week after, and Seton Hall. So I think they were the 3rd place team in Maui. They lost to USC on a controversial call, which they didn't have a challenge, but they played a ranked Trojans team. I don't see their ranking anymore, but they're not ranked. But they played a very solid USC team that's 6-0. They lost by 2. They beat ranked NC State. They're 6-1.
So that game's not a given either.
Yeah, that's definitely not a given. I mean, I don't even know if that's a favorable at this point, but it's definitely I would say definitely a step down from Purdue and Michigan. But that's always a fun rivalry going. This year it's at Prudential Center, so I mean, I would like to go to that one. That'd be fun. But yeah, definitely going to be a tough stretch here for Rutgers. Obviously, Purdue, Michigan, Big Ten week, and then the Garden State Hardwood Classic. I know everybody looks forward to that, kind of like the way we're looking forward to this Rutgers Penn State game. It's kind of similar vibes game, except for it's a little bit more competitive. Rutgers has won last few of those, so yeah, but definitely a tough stretch for Rutgers. But I mean, at least I guess they come out of Vegas with a win, and now they get ready for.
That's the big thing, though. At least they're not coming out of Vegas like completely empty-handed.
Right.
Now, I don't think anybody is expecting this team to make the tournament. I don't think anybody's expecting this team to make any sort of after the season tournament. But at the end of the day, we want competitive basketball games. We don't want to just be getting ran off the court every freaking day,
Right.
Like, we want competitive basketball games. We want reasons to believe. We know Pikel's not going anywhere, so as much as I personally think that he might be done, and everybody wants to compare Pikel to Schiano. Yeah, but Schiano didn't lose to Norfolk State. You lost to Central Connecticut State when you didn't even look ready.
Yeah. There's a difference. Yeah.
There's a difference.
Yeah, that's true. Because at least we win the games. If football wins the games you're supposed to win, like that's also frustrating in its own way, especially when those are also uglier wins, like this year against Ohio. But again, that was a pretty solid Ohio team, like I've mentioned, and they still won.
Again, at the end of the day. Would you rather lose that game or win that game? You'd rather win.
100% win, and yeah, I mean you're right. I mean it's a little selfish to say, oh well, I mean like whatever, but like like who cares? They they should have beaten them by more. But at the end of the day, they did win. It was season opener. That was a good team that, I mean, they ended up beating West Virginia the next week. So, I mean, there's nothing to sneeze at. And then for Rutgers, and even in the Big Ten, Rutgers wins games. It's not just, like I like to say, they're non-conference warriors, but even the Big Ten, they beat Maryland, a Maryland team that we didn't have faith that they would beat. They beat them. So, I mean, they beat the teams that they should beat. It's just that they don't tend to do more than that, but at least they don't do less than that. With basketball, it's like sometimes you just don't know. Like, I mean, they haven't even really all proven that they could do that consistently because Central Connecticut State shouldn't have happened. I mean, at the end of the day, they did win the other 4 at least, so maybe you're allowed to not win.
I understand that. I understand that. But the point that I'm making here is that, first of all, Central Connecticut State is not a one-time thing. Last year, they blew it against Kennesaw State.
Yeah, I feel like this happens like once almost every year. Like Kennesaw State, a few years ago, it's like Lafayette or something. There's always that one landmine loss. And unfortunately, in basketball, like that can ruin your whole season, like right there, like from the analytical standpoint.
The one that kept us out of the Lafayette loss was the one that kept us out of the NCAA tournament.
Yeah, see, like these things, like you could say they don't matter, but they absolutely do matter. And like not even just because the loss sucks, but because like the committee will throw your resume in the trash can in March, and that's just the reality of it. But especially if you don't make up for it during the rest of the season, which they've also not done in the last couple of years. And even when they have, they haven't been able to make the tournament because of those types of losses, or like the one to Minnesota where they absolutely should have made the tournament that year. I think this was like 2-3 years ago now, but things like that, you just can't have these types of losses on your resume really. And then especially if you can't make up for it, and like at least those other teams back then, they would make up for it by having good seasons. Like the last year's team just didn't even have a good season, so now you definitely can't afford like a landmine like that. And then this year, I mean, yeah, I don't even know what to expect this year, but CCSU was a bad loss. That you're right. Football would not have that type of loss. Basketball, I mean, that was not only was it a loss though, it was like a bad, like a domination by them, and that's where I have a bigger issue than it's just an off night. No, they like completely dominated the game against Rutgers, and that's a much bigger problem. So, and they shot well, they attacked the rim, and it's like their inability to blow out the other teams before that showed that those types of things could absolutely happen, and it was just a matter of time. And I think that was the most frustrating part, that it wasn't just an off night; it was like a reflection of where this team really was at that point. And it just didn't look too much better in Vegas, honestly, but they did get the win against UNLV. So, I mean, yeah, now it's all about Big Ten play, or well, not quite yet, but now it's a tough week ahead. And then there should be a few more winnable games before we return the calendar. But then once Big Ten play starts, like most of these games are going to be pretty tough. I mean, there's some other teams out there in like Maryland, Oregon that have been struggling. Oregon also lost all 3 games. Maryland won 2 of them, or lost 2 of them, beat UNLV by like 7. So there certainly should be some winnable games in the Big Ten slate, but I don't think too many, I guess.
I wouldn't necessarily be stunned if we split with Maryland, because I don't know if Maryland is all they're cracked up to be. I mean, I understand that even though like we lost to who we lost to, Maryland was in a dogfight with Mount St. Mary's, and that's not a team that they should necessarily be in a dogfight with.
Right.
I think they won their conference last year, but I also think they lost a lot of transfers. So I don't know. I don't think they don't have Patrick Queen, Derek Queen.
Derek Queen, yes.
Yeah, Derek. Patrick Queen's the linebacker. I always confuse them.
Yeah, Patrick Queen's the linebacker that I think now plays on Pittsburgh. We used to play in Maryland's team.
We used to play on Baltimore, yeah.
Yeah, right? Like, exactly.
But yeah, no, Derek Queen is no longer there. That kid is strutting his stuff in the NBA. But yeah, so first of all, I think Penn State is absolutely beatable.
Oh,
I mean,
yeah.
They have talented freshmen, but even though we are not good, I don't think we will be finishing this season last in the Big Ten. I think that's going to go to Penn State.
Yeah, I mean looking at they've won games, but they're all against easier teams, and even then they've also struggled. Their one high major game so far, they lost to Providence by 12. Like, yeah, they're probably going to be among the worst teams in the Big Ten this season. So yeah, I mean, if not the worst. So I mean, I don't think we're going to be a seller team, but like I said, Oregon struggled in Vegas. They lost all 3 games, including the last one to Creighton. Maryland just doesn't look that great this year, honestly. Like they've been they beat Mount St. Mary's in overtime. I think they did make the tournament last year, but this year they're 1-4, and Ohio State beat them by like 53 points. So like like that's compared to Maryland beating them by 5, like that's a big difference.
Like double overtime, right?
Yeah, also overtime 5-point win too for Maryland, and then
I don't know why it was like double overtime.
But anyway, yeah, that's a big loss. And then so you compare the 2 of those, and those are completely different games. Like one's a blowout, one's an escape, and that doesn't look too promising. But I mean, they lost to Georgetown. I was watching a little bit of the opener against Coppin State. That team was hanging around, so it's just like. And then, they beat UNLV in the opener, but I guess UNLV is probably not one of the best teams. I mean, Rutgers beat them by a bit more. And then Gonzaga and Alabama just absolutely ran the Terps out of the gym. So, I mean, last year, obviously, they made it into the Sweet 16 before losing to Florida. But this year just doesn't appear to be that team, which it could be good for Rutgers because they played Maryland twice. They played them twice this season because I guess they're one of the teams where they have the home and away. I think Penn State's probably one of the other ones, which is also good, I guess.
Maryland, Penn State, Michigan State.
Michigan State, right. I wonder if this year's Michigan State game is going to be at the Garden like it usually is, but I guess we shall see.
Tom Izzo doesn't like playing at the rack.
Yeah, I know. That's the funniest thing. Like, yeah.
It's so So stupid.
Right.
Like,
This year, Michigan State is like a wagon, though. Like, I mean, they've been absolutely dominant. They look really good. I mean, they just beat UNC yesterday by 16 points at the one of the tournaments. This one's in Florida, I believe. So there's just so many going on right now. It's hard to keep track. But they beat Kentucky. They beat Arkansas, all ranked teams. By the way, they beat Arkansas, Kentucky, and UNC. So, the usual knock on the Big Ten is they don't win these types of games. They struggle in March. Michigan State's kind of been like the exception to that rule for a while. They've at least had some success in the tournament in March, and now they beat North Carolina, who's a team I think that beat them in the NCAA a couple years ago, or something like that as well. So
yeah,
I
I
mean,
get it. Yeah.
yeah. So I mean, MSU though, like definitely doing good for the Big Ten in the non-conference. They got Duke in on Saturday too, so we'll get to see if that continues. I mean, well, they have their conference opener against Iowa, and then they have Duke on Saturday. So yeah, we'll see if the magic continues for the Spartans. But that, I mean, long story short, that's going to be a tough team for Rutgers to play this season for sure. I mean, they look like they might be even better than last year when they made the Elite Eight.
Yeah, absolutely. But that pretty much does it for all the basketball talk that we have for you guys here today. We are going to be shifting over into a football preview. Joining us now is Brian Bennett from the Black Shoes Diaries, helping us preview some Rutgers Penn State. How you doing today, Brian?
I'm doing well. How about you guys?
I really can't complain.
Yeah, pretty good Thanksgiving, and obviously looking forward to the game. I mean, it's a big one for Rutgers and Penn State. Obviously, both teams looking for bowl eligibility, so you don't really get these types of games that often. I guess either way for Rutgers or for Penn State, where it's like winning in, like losing out. So stakes are really high. I mean, both of our seasons have kind of been a bit rocky. I mean, I would say probably yours like a lot more than ours even. So, but hopefully a good way. Yeah. I mean, going from like number 2 in the country to where they are, but it seems like they've come out the other side of it, and they found their groove. They're starting to play better football, which makes me a bit nervous for this weekend because it feels like they're firing on all cylinders. But I'm definitely excited for the opportunity because, like I said, you don't get it a lot. It should be a great Saturday.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, I think Penn State they've stayed motivated, which I think has been maybe the most shocking thing on our end. I've sort of predicted their downfall multiple times, especially, they played Indiana a few weeks ago, and I went into that game thinking Penn State would lose by, I think I picked like a 4 touchdown spread. And if not for a miraculous 4th down, last second catch, Penn State beats Indiana. Yeah. And even then I still thought, well, now they're going to go to Michigan State and maybe that home atmosphere won't be there for them. And they've played well the last 2 weeks, admittedly against 2 teams that were also playing backup quarterbacks. And there's a lot of, that kind of aspect to it. But they've kept playing hard, which I think has been the really impressive part. And they sound motivated. Terry Smith has sounded motivated for them to, get to a bowl game. The players say they're going to play in a bowl game if they get to 6-6, which again, even I sort of thought if they get to 6-6, we'll see a whole lot of opt-outs and portal and stuff like that. But they're saying all the right things.
Yeah, absolutely. But one thing I will kind of mention is that, against Michigan State, that was a game until very late in the 4th quarter, against a not so great Michigan State team. And even though Nebraska was out their starting quarterback, you guys just came in and romped them anyway. So it's almost like, finally getting that win has allowed this team to turn on a switch and get everything firing, as Arnav said, on all cylinders.
Yeah, I would say they've relaxed too. I mean, I guess the biggest thing, it was just, there was, again, after Smith took over, it was at Iowa, at night at Kinnick, it was at, the Horseshoe, it was home against Indiana. And yeah, I think so. Like they won that game. There was, questions. That game was definitely competitive into the 4th quarter, and Penn State sort of man-balled its way to a win there in the 4th. And yeah, I just think all the pressure was off, and they looked really good last week. And I don't know if they can play that well again. Honestly, it was just, it was definitely, I think the home crowd had a lot to do with it last week. But the game plan worked perfect, and we'll see tomorrow.
Yeah.
So one thing that we like to do on this pod is, especially when we have a guest on, we like to kind of get our readers like thinking a little bit more about the game, a little bit more about their opponent. We like to ask like a list of questions. The first one usually being like, on offense, if you were to pick like your best position group and your worst position group, like what would it be and why?
Oh, this is easy. We'll start with the worst. It's wide receivers and has been for 3 years. So that's simple. Quite literally, I wrote this last year, and I ahead of the playoff game against Notre Dame, and I wrote it a couple times early this season. If Penn State had good wide receivers in 2023, they're probably a playoff team. They lost to Ohio State that year at the Shoe, and the wide receivers were awful. 2024, people know this stat. Penn State lost in the college football semifinal to Notre Dame, and their wide receivers had 0 catches for 0 yards. And literally, if there's any outside threat at all to open things up for Tyler Warren, Penn State plays for a national title last year. And they brought in 3 transfer receivers. They brought in a couple of, highly touted 4-star, freshman recruits. And even still, it's just been a real mixed bag at that position. They've played better the last couple of weeks. Trebor Pena, who came from Syracuse, had a nice game against Indiana. Kobe Howard's a freshman who's played better, but still, that's the weak link. I mean, those wide receivers, they don't get separation. They're not playmakers. That's simple. In terms of best position, it's also simple. It's running back. Penn State has two of its. This is kind of a wild stat, right? In today's college football, but 2 of its all-time 5 leading rushers, and that including Katron Allen, who's now the leading rusher all-time at Penn State. So 2 of the guys who rushed for the most yards in Penn State history will be lining up in the backfield on Saturday. So Nicholas Singleton, he's gotten kind of the hype throughout his career. He was the more highly touted guy coming in out of high school. He was the Gatorade Player of the Year in high school football in the nation. He's Big Ten Freshman of the Year. He's run for 3,500 yards, whatever it is. And now Katron Allen has sort of surpassed him because Allen's really a better overall back, and he's had a really great senior year. And since Terry Smith took over as head coach, they've made it a point to feed Katron Allen, and we've seen it the last couple of weeks. He's been Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week each of the last 2 weeks.
Yeah. So kind of going to flip that script too. We're going to same question on defense. What is the strongest position and what is the weakest position?
I'd say strongest position. It's tough. I think they're really. I would have said defensive line at the beginning of the year, and I don't think those guys played up to their level. But I think the last couple of weeks they've been good. So I'll go ahead and stick with them. Denia Dennis Sutton is a defensive end. He's a 5-star talent. Picked Penn State over Georgia. He's been a 4-year player. Zane Durant is a very disruptive defensive tackle. So just that defensive line in general, I think, is really a strength. Ironically, Penn State's known as linebacker U, and that's been the big disappointing position this year. Tony Rojas is out for the year. He was kind of their star linebacker. It took a while. Amari Campbell, who's a transfer from North Carolina, has played. He's played really hard the last few weeks, especially. But that's just a group that hasn't gotten the job done, over the course of the season. And when teams are, UCLA really lit up Penn State and they attacked the linebackers. Iowa, you can probably pin that loss on the linebackers a lot.
Yeah, that certainly makes sense. And the pass rush, pretty good. It's definitely an interesting look where I guess the linebackers are kind of like the group that's holding it back with all the history that Penn State's had at that position. All the like Michael Parsons and all the NFL Abdul Carter, who I'm a Giants fan, so I mean like having him on our team, I see that. But yeah, I mean in terms of Penn State, I mean I guess with the whole season just with James Franklin being fired and Terry Smith coming in as head coach and kind of all the struggles that they've had on a week-to-week basis. But the last couple of weeks, I mean, they've won, and Penn State players really seem to rally around Terry Smith. They're advocating for him to take the job full time. I mean, he's really brought the best out of them. A lot of teams could have just lost focus and said, "Oh, that's it," but they didn't give up, even though they weren't able to win games. And what does, I guess, Terry Smith being on leading the team, like what stands out about his style of leadership, and what's allowing him to, I guess, motivate the players to come out and beat Michigan State, beat Nebraska now dominantly, and kind of back to now playing their best football for Rutgers?
I think one of the big things he's sort of said this. He's blunt. He is going to call people out. He is, and I think hearing stories and things like that the last few weeks, he's been very willing to call out the stars of the team. He's been willing to say, I don't care if you're a 3-year starter. You're not playing up to your standard. You're playing worse than you were last year. He's used a lot of these. Penn State's a very senior laden team. They have a lot of guys that will and want to play in the NFL. And I think he has gotten across to them like, okay, this is your last chance to put something on tape. What's going to be your, legacy at Penn State? Is going to be, you went out 3-9 or 4-8, or you fought till the end and you kept playing even in, November when everyone said you had nothing to play for. So I think that's maybe been the thing that's helped him the most. And he's a great relationship guy. He said that, he's been one of their lead recruiters for years. And he had a comment, something like, basically every player who's ever come through this building has sat down in my office multiple times. He's a very hands-on kind of positional. He's a position coach. So he's been a hands-on guy. And I think the guys really do respect him. And I think they've taken that lesson, to heart.
This question might not be the most fun one to answer, so I'm just gonna warn you to begin with. With the ongoing head coach search and the flurry of decommitments that have happened because of James Franklin's firing, what is like the future of this program? Like, what trajectory do we think we're heading in? Is it something that is it something that just going to be a minor blip on the radar, or is this kind of like a rotten tree coming down a little bit?
I think I'm saying this. I mean, I honestly think the program's in a good spot. Penn State. I'm sitting here on this podcast, and it's 14 years ago. People probably know what happened. I mean, Penn State survived worse, right?
Yeah.
And I know it's sort of a new era of college football. But with that in mind, I think I said this kind of we did our Q&A, and I said this in the Q&A for your site. Like, look, Penn State for the last 50, 60 years has sort of been in the mix. I think this is a top, 12 to 15-ish at worst job in the country. I think most people would agree with that. And that's probably being conservative with that. It's a place that has a lot of money. It's a place that has a lot of tradition. It's a place that geographically doesn't have the competition of, maybe, a school, Georgia or LSU, in terms of recruiting. And I think they have an AD who has flat said, like, our expectation is to play for national titles. And so he is going to, put money toward that. And I think we all know this, like, this has become just such an arms race in terms of just, do you have the capital to compete at this level? And I think Penn State does. And again, it's not a program. I've heard a lot of, you're about to be Nebraska. You're about to be Nebraska. And, Nebraska was this kind of, downward trajectory for years. And, Penn State, we can sit here and we're having this conversation, which still just seems wild to me. And 11 months ago, Penn State was playing, was leading in the fourth quarter of the college football semifinal. So it's still a team that I think people will want to go to. Now, at the same time, I just feel like the timing of the firing, I mean, I don't know. In the time we're doing this podcast, I'm sure 4 other coaches, who Penn State might want will sign, extensions. It just seems like that's what's happened. Like the second that Franklin was fired, Signetti was locked up, Rule was locked up. All these guys who had any sort of connection whatsoever to the job got locked up. So I think it will be interesting to see who they end up getting. But they have enough money. There are enough resources where I think they're going to be in a good spot to moving forward. Do I expect them to be in the playoff next year? No, but also their schedule is not that bad. So if schedule is not that daunting next year, so if the right coach came in and he brought some recruits, maybe they're in the mix. I don't know.
Gotcha. It's just, to me, or at least from my perspective, the Franklin firing was just ridiculous because you want to talk about, okay, Penn State legend Joe Paterno was there for 30 plus years, 40 years, somewhere around there.
As a coach at all, I think it ended up being about 60 years as an assistant head coach. Yeah. So,
and he was there for 2 national titles in 40 years.
Mm-hmm.
I think, with the level that Franklin brought them to, that they were always competing. I don't know if firing him right then and there was always the right point of view. That's just me, though.
I don't know. I mean, I feel like it kind of had to happen because, like, when they lost their standard of, yeah, I mean, it's one thing to lose all the big games, but I think their fans, like, I'm not even saying it as, like, obviously Rutgers feels a certain type of way about Penn State, but Penn State fans were very vocal about, he has to go this, that. Like, they were doing it before, but when they started losing the teams like Northwestern, UCLA, like, if he stayed there, things would have just gotten worse and worse and worse. And for Franklin, while he brought them to a certain point, he couldn't get them over the hump. But I think what really did him in was when Oregon, instead of just becoming one loss to a good team, became a snowball for like Northwestern and UCLA. And then now it's just like, well, he's lost the locker room. Like the season's gone down the drain. Everybody's tired of it. Everybody, doesn't, you know what I mean? Like he was getting booed on his home field. And I was just like, they're not going to be able to turn this around. But I think the reason that they even were able to get back to where they are now is because they had new energy. So I feel like, even though Franklin's, a good coach for what it's worth, maybe not the best, but like, I just feel like it was a mutual, it was a parting that kind of had to happen for both parties to get to like a better spot. And I think Virginia Tech is a good spot for Franklin. I think he's already hitting the recruiting trail hard. He's flipped some commits. Mm-hmm. I think in the ACC, he might be able to have some better success where he doesn't have to run into these juggernauts. And for Penn State too, I mean, I think they deserve a chance to try to get more, like, you know what I mean? Like as much as maybe I wouldn't want it, but for their program, I mean, for a program that's top 5, top 10, like in the country, if they don't deserve to have the ability to compete for a national championship, like who does? Like Ohio State, Indiana. I mean, do you even want to include the SEC anymore? Because I don't even know about, you know what I mean? But like maybe like 3-4 teams, but Penn State should at least have the chance to try to elevate their standard. Now, there's a risk it fails, but I think when you're Penn State and you've been knocking on the door for like 10 plus years, like I think it's at least worth a shot. That's my opinion about the whole thing.
I do see both perspectives. I do. I think one thing that again, you sort of on the Twitter sphere and stuff like that, like people are like, okay, Penn State's impatient, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, let's call it what it is. James Franklin's the first Penn State football coach ever to be fired for on-field performance. I mean, it's never happened. So it's not like, I think Penn State has shown patience. And even with Franklin, there were murmurs after his first couple of years, is this going to work? And then they got hot with Barkley and McSorley and won the Big Ten. And even then it was like, okay, they're set up, they're top 5 in the country next year. And they lost the big games. They lost to Ohio State. It just felt like this endless cycle. And it was like, okay, a couple of years, I think with Penn State fans, if you could really go back to the Paterno era, and I'm old enough to sort of have grown up the tail end of the Paterno era, it was always sort of, and this was Paterno's philosophy, like you can't be good every year. You're going to be good every 3 years. You have a shot to win it every 3 years. And Ohio State's proven that's not true, of course. And a lot of teams have proven that's not true. But that was the Paterno philosophy. And I think Penn State fans are sort of okay with that. Like, let's, a down year for Penn State maybe is 9-3, 8-4. But as long as every 3 years you're in the mix of, 11-1 and competing for a title, I think people are fine with that.
Right.
It's just like Franklin it's kind of like he had gotten Penn State to the precipice of that so many times. And then it was like things, in 2017, that team was supposed to be the team and it fell apart. 2020, COVID exceptions, whatever, but that was supposed to be the team and they were 4-5 in that shortened season. And this year, above all, I mean, this is without question the most State team of all time. And you're right. It was like he had lost the locker room. He'd lost the stadium. I mean, he was booed off the field after that.
At that point, like I did kind of feel bad that was going on, but at that point, I kind of was like, I don't know. I mean, like it's one thing to lose to Oregon. I just feel like part of the problem is like I think so much went into that Oregon game for months and months and weeks. And the first 3 weeks, oh, who cares? It's Villanova and this and that, and then now you play Oregon. It's like a Super Bowl, and then you lose it. And I think to their credit, they played. They were getting kind of like, it felt kind of like the Ohio State games of the past, but they fought back. It became like a 50-50 game. It became like a game they could have won. They lost. So now, but then from that to losing to UCLA and Northwestern, and I was just like, there's just no way. Like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, if, like I said, if he stayed, I think things would have gotten a lot worse. There would have been a lot more problems. Like, I mean, obviously it sucks in the short run, but I think in the long run, I think both Franklin and Penn State are going to be better off for it.
I was going to say about the recruiting too, because that's kind of Andrew brought up to begin with. The 20, I think, this class, the 2026 class, I think a lot, those are the kids who are flipping to Va-Tech. I think some of those kids would have stayed for sure, but already after they lost to UCLA, when they lost that game, the 2027 kids were fleeing. They had a couple of big name early commitments. There's a running back, out of Pennsylvania named Keemon Spell, who's like the number one running back in the country, and he was committed, and they lost to UCLA, and he's like, I'm gonna go check out Ohio State now. It's like it was already sort of like starting, and I think Pat Kraft, the athletic director, realized like, okay, this was the senior laden team. This was if we're gonna rip this Band-Aid off, this is the time to do it. And again, the only thing in retrospect with timing, everyone in the world knows Penn State's open, and so all of these people who were potential candidates, are now all of a sudden being locked up to extensions, or, I don't know what Penn State's going to do, because I genuinely don't, because they're also, there's some of these guys they probably were interested in. Well, now they're in the playoffs and they're not going to leave, so it's just, they're not going to leave right now. And so what does that do to your recruiting? So it's just, the whole thing's kind of become messy. But again, I just think Penn State has enough resources where they'll come out of it okay on the other side, but it probably won't be as seamless or as smooth as they initially envisioned.
Well, it's not even just Penn State that's the only attracting job that's open now. We got to think that Florida is now open.
Yep.
LSU is open. I bet you like all those second tier universities, because you have your Michigans, your Penn States, your Ohio States, your Floridas, LSU's, whatever, and then you have like your Michigan States and the kind of level below that, which can have really good coaches that might look to go to a better job.
Yep.
Example, DeBoer going from Washington to Alabama. So I think that's those like second tier universities saw that and panicked, and that's why everybody got extended.
Yeah. Like Lane Kiffin now as well. Like, I mean, there's big rumors of him going to Florida from Ole Miss. So like, or LSU. I mean, or maybe staying. Like, who knows? Like, I'm surprised that, like where Ole Miss is, like that he'd want to leave that program now. But money talks, and it's SEC, and as big as Ole Miss is, I'm sure it's not the brand that LSU is Florida. So who knows? Maybe that job opens up, and Ole Miss is been where Penn State's been kind of in the last few years, knocking on the door, but kind of like always a bridesmaid, never the bride kind of story. But they've been there, and they're pretty close this year too, to or a place where they can maybe make at least somewhat of a run. So that's probably going to be an attractive job as well. So yeah, I mean, a lot of attractive coaching jobs. But yeah, I'm definitely intrigued to see who gets to or who ends up at Penn State, because obviously Cignetti's off the board, Matt Rule's off the board. So I mean, it's just like, I don't know. I'm sure they'll get somebody. They're going to have to get somebody, and they'll have enough money, and it's attractive enough where they'll probably get somebody to at least, decently good. But it's just a matter of who that person is. And I wouldn't really be opposed to them, sticking with Terry Smith, like the way that the candidates are flying off the board and what he's done for the team. Like I wouldn't rule that one. I'm not saying that's like the way to go, but I wouldn't be opposed to keeping someone like that there, because obviously what he's done in this season as an interim, like, I don't really see why that's like such a horrible idea, I guess.
I think Terry Smith is probably, he was just stumping for the job after they beat Nebraska. I mean, the players were too, holding up signs on the sideline, things like that. I think the difficult part is you don't fire a coach and sort of blow things up to then be like, well, actually, we're gonna give it to this. Terry Smith came to Penn State Terry Smith's a Penn State guy. He played there in the early 90s. He was a very successful high school coach in Western PA for a long time, but he still didn't come to Penn State until James Franklin came. He was one of his first hires. I need a guy in state to help with recruiting. So that's why I just you can argue Smith maybe been the most successful position coach there, but I can't see that, and unless everything falls apart. And I still think Bob Chesney at JMU is probably a leading candidate. There's talk of would Brian Hartline, the coordinator at Ohio State, would he come over? So I still think there's some names out there who they'll go to first, and there's allegedly some mystery candidate who's making all the rounds and the behind the scene stuff. There's a mystery candidate who people are talking about, but I think Bob Chesney maybe be the safe bet right now. But I do think Terry Smith has gone from someone who I didn't think would have any shot at all back in October when he took over to now. Like, I mean, I could see a legitimate case being made, but I still think Pat Kraft I think everything else would have to fall apart for it to go to Terry Smith.
One interesting fact about Terry Smith and Coach Shiano is that Coach Shiano was a graduate assistant when Terry Smith was a player. So just something to keep in mind. Keep in mind there. But we are going to kind of like roll into some quick positional breakdowns. Obviously, or at least in my opinion, I think that Rutgers does have a little bit of an edge in the quarterback position. Callie Ekmanis, 2,700 yards, about that, 17 touchdowns, 7 interceptions. Grunkmeyer or Grunkemeyer?
Grunkemeyer. It's almost like
Grunkemeyer. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah.
Grunkemeyer, he's been consistent. He definitely needs his running backs to set up the pass for him. 870 yards, 5 touchdowns, 4 picks. Consistent, but like I said, I don't think Penn State's offense really goes anywhere without those running backs, like you were saying.
Oh, I would agree with that for sure. I think that if you go back to the Iowa game when Grunkemeyer took over, they were trying to do some like read option stuff. They actually had a backup quarterback they were using a little bit to do some running game with him, and they it's just been like the evolution of this offense it's not been fun to watch, but at least like finally it's for the first time the last 2 weeks it seems like Penn State has a cohesive plan. Like we're going to run the ball a lot and we're going to play action off of that and actually throw the ball down the field a little bit more, not necessarily like over the top, but at least like, routes, 16 to 18 yards down the field, as opposed to all these like these like bubble screens and things like that they were using a lot early in the year. And I think Grunkmeyer's done better. It's almost like they've given him like one read, like play action. It's almost like flood concept type stuff, like A or B. If neither of them are open, go ahead and scramble, and he looked good last week doing that. He just didn't make any mistakes last week. And he really didn't make any mistakes throwing the ball against Michigan State either. And that's what hurt him a little bit against Iowa. They lost that game and he threw a late interception in the first half that sort of gave Iowa some points. And also against Indiana, they came out of the half and he threw an interception that let Indiana take a 2-score lead. So he's been more protective of the ball, I think, the last couple of weeks. But also, I think they've done a better job of scheming things to make his life easy. But yeah, absolutely, I still would. If you offered me a straight up trade, I would take Callie Ekmanis. Absolutely.
I would agree with those points. Shifting over to the running backs, not to harp on that too long because we kind of made our points there. Antoine Raymond is a very solid back. I would still give the lean towards Penn State's running back room because they have both Allen and Singleton.
Right.
But like I said, Raymond is no slouch in the running back room. Over 1,000 yards, 3rd season in a row that Rutgers has had a 1,000-yard rusher. It's interesting. It's interesting the parity between the two schools, but I would still give Penn State the advantage in the running back room.
Yeah, a few weeks ago, I know Raymond had 40 carries or something in a game or something like that, right?
Yeah.
I do a weekly column. I do is I kind of take a look around the league, and I actually gave him my Big Ten Player of the Week that week, Offensive Player of the Week, because I was like, if you give the ball to a guy 40 times, he deserves something. I'm not sure if he probably didn't put that on his refrigerator or anything like that, but it's out there in the blogosphere. He was the BSD Big Ten Offensive Player of the Week for that, but.
I know the Big Ten didn't give him that one.
No flowers for that.
Yeah, they didn't. They haven't given KJ Duff the one. Either when he had also I think a 240-yard performance on the dot. So, but I mean the national committee or the Doak Walker committee has made him a national semifinalist. So I'd say he's definitely from them he's getting his dues, and I think at the end of the day that's the more important one to focus on. So yeah.
Gonna take a quick pivot on to I have them labeled as pass catchers. That's the way ESPN labels them, so that's the way I got them. So in this area, I give a heavy lean to Rutgers. DT Sheffield, KJ Duff, Ian Strong, versus Trevor Pina, Devontae Ross, Kyron Hudson. Your leading catcher is Pina, who has 416 yards on 40 catches and 1 touchdown. Ross seems to be a little bit more of the end zone option. He has 5 touchdowns, but I think it's clearing away an advantage for Rutgers, at least from the pass catcher's point of view.
Oh, I told you it was the weakest unit for Penn State. You add in tight end. Penn State kind of has a guy who's coming back from injury, and he's kind of emerged the last couple of weeks. His name's Andrew Rappelier. He's a really good blocker. He caught a touchdown last week against Nebraska. And he's a guy I like. But there's no question. I would again. I mean, give me Rutgers wide receivers, and maybe we're having a different conversation with Penn State right now. I mean that.
Yeah, well, to be honest with you, I don't think they're going anywhere this offseason. I'm hoping, please, but
he's Strong, and I think Sheffield's graduating. But yeah, Strong and Duff. Hoping we get them back because both of those two have been sensational. I mean, they've been NFL caliber wide receivers. Strong had 3 touchdowns against Maryland. KJ Duff, like I said, had the 240-yard performance against Purdue. I mean, both of them are just like downfield, like contested catch guys who can have like ridiculous catch radiuses, and Sheffield's kind of like a speedster too, so he's definitely no slouch either. He can run a slant or he can go down and burn the defense downfield. So it's been a fun receiving room for Rutgers, something that Rutgers has not had in quite some time. I mean, Rutgers is usually a very defensive heavy school where the defense was kind of somehow trying to keep the team in Big Ten games. The offense was sputtering, if anything, relying on the run game behind like a guy like Monangai or Pacheco, who are both now in the NFL. But now they kind of have a balanced attack. But yeah, those pass catchers are definitely, and Caddick Manis at quarterback, he could definitely throw the ball. He's been a big improvement at quarterback as well. So I mean, the pass offense has really been fun. It's made Rutgers 2-dimensional, which has been pretty fun to see.
Now it's time to give some love to the big boys up front. I would say that Penn State does have an advantage in this area. Rutgers, especially the left tackle position, we've been on our 3rd string left tackle since game 2 of this season. So I would give heavy advantage to the Penn State offensive line.
Coming into this year, I think I wrote that I thought the offensive line was going to be Penn State's strength, and they didn't play very well early. And again, part of that was maybe scheme. Part of it was because they have the right guard, Anthony Donko. He got injured late last year, and it took maybe just now he's sort of getting healthy. But this is a group that has played really well the last couple of weeks. I thought they played well against Indiana. I thought they played well against Iowa. So really, a lot of the year they've played well, maybe with the exception of Ohio State. I don't think they played very well. But while they played okay, I don't think they played up to what we expected them to until probably last week. And last week's the first week where I watched Penn State, and they just controlled the line of scrimmage from the get-go. It was a 97-yard drive to open the game. Penn State held on 4th and goal and then got the ball, and 97 yards right down the field just made it look easy.
Yeah.
And I think this honestly, I think Penn State's biggest advantage in the game is I just think the offensive line that they have is really good. I mean, they're good, and they're finally playing to the level we thought they would.
Yeah, I mean, you can't fault them for not playing well against Ohio State. I don't think anybody plays well against Ohio State. We've always, especially on this podcast, we've always compared Ohio State to a steamroller. This year, they might not blow right past it, but either way, you're going to end up crushed.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, but I guess our last kind of breakdown would be the defense. We kind of do that as a whole. Rutgers defense has been, at the start of the year, it was absolutely abysmal. Running quarterbacks would be our Achilles heel. Actually, everything was our Achilles heel. Couldn't stop the deep ball. Couldn't stop the running quarterback. Couldn't stop the run. But now that, Shiano has kind of yanked the play call sheet out of Rob Smith's hands, the defense has been playing a lot better. They were able to hold Ohio State to 2 touchdowns on 6 possessions in the first half. Was able to severely limit what they were able to do in the running game. I would still give the heavy tilt towards Penn State, but Rutgers defense in the past couple of weeks has certainly come alive and started to play a lot better.
Yeah, I know. I wrote in my questions to you for our site. I watched the Ohio State game last week, just obviously knowing Rutgers was ahead, and I was wildly. I know Ohio State was down Smith and Tate. I understand that, but I was still wildly impressed by Rutgers. I thought they played really hard. And that's a tough place to go into and compete. And, especially when the offense, because no one's offense is playing well against Ohio State. When the offense isn't giving you a lot, I thought they hung tough. And it is kind of funny because I just, in my brain, I have like this idea of what a Rutgers Penn State game is going to be, because they always play in November. The weather's always awful. And like, it's like Rutgers is like, Schiano is like, I'm a Schiano fan because I just remember him being at Penn State and how, he was, don't want to talk about who he worked for, but he was a really, really, good coach, a good defensive coach. And, I've always kind of respected the way they play. And, I was kind of looking at stats coming in, and so I was like, wait, what happened? What's going on here?
Right. Yeah.
So, that was kind of one of my more surprising things. But Rutgers, I thought last week looked like what I typically expect Rutgers to look like defensively. I thought they were in the right place all the time, fundamental, tackled well, couldn't beat them over the top, stuff like that. They made life difficult for Ohio State for as long as most anyone can.
Yeah, I mean, they were in the game in the third quarter. It was 14-3 14-3, and I think they even pushed Ohio State back to make it 3rd down and 11, and then OSU kind of like ran a pick play. They scored a touchdown, and from there on, like, the defense gave out. But it looked kind of like the way Rutgers used to look, like a few years ago in the early part of the Big Ten, where not even the early part, but like when he got, the early part of Schiano 2.0, where the defense was single-handedly keeping the team in the game and fighting, and eventually they just got tired because, when you're going off the field with the offense is going 3 and out and you're right back out there, I mean, even the best defenses will get tired at that point. So, I mean, and Ohio State's defense is even that much better. And the only knock on Rutgers defense, I would say, is penalties. I mean, they were committing penalties. That was keeping drives alive last week, but they were, compared to where they were just a few weeks ago, like when they played Oregon had over 750 yards of total offense. They could not stop anything, the run, the pass. I mean, the deep play, it was like a scrimmage. And now against a team that's probably even better than Oregon, they kept them in check, made them work for it. It became 42-9, but I mean, like, it feels like every game for Ohio State ends it's been like that this season. But they made the Buckeyes work for it, which I guess, even though the scoreline looks kind of lopsided, gives me some level of hope going into Penn State, that if the defense can keep the team in the game again, the offense this time can score some amount of points. Is that going to be enough to win? I don't know, but I think it should at least keep them in the game and give them a fighting chance.
And I would say about Penn State's defense, just to kind of talk about them for a minute. They were so bad, kind of the middle stretch of the season. They really played well through overtime of the Oregon game, and then they just couldn't get a stop. We go back to the Oregon game. I know we kind of talked about it earlier, but Penn State had more than a chance to win that game. Penn State led in overtime. Just get a stop, get Oregon off the field. Don't allow Oregon to score a touchdown. Penn State wins. The whole conversation is different. Then they followed up with maybe one of the worst Penn State defense performances I've ever seen against UCLA. Well, maybe, and then against Northwestern, they couldn't get a stop. The crazy stat with Penn State is, Penn State has led in 9 of its 11 games in the fourth quarter. They've had a lead in 9 of 11 games, and they're 5-6 because they couldn't get stops against Oregon, couldn't get a stop against Iowa, couldn't get a stop against UCLA, couldn't get a stop against Northwestern. It's wild that they've not been able to get these stops. Indiana, of course, the most recent one. But what Penn State has done the last few weeks is that they've started to attack a little bit more. Jim Knowles came in as defense coordinator. He got paid all the money to come over from Ohio State, and the scheme wasn't working. It wasn't really fitting what Penn State had, and they've made some adjustments, and they've gotten more aggressive with blitzing a little bit more. They've gotten more aggressive with, maybe they want their defensive ends to get upfield a little more and attack the quarterback like Abdul Carter used to do, as opposed to just sort of being like, taking up gaps. And I think this has been especially important because Penn State doesn't have the linebackers to play this style. So, when it was like they were, hey, Zane Duran at defense tackle was taking up, 2 blockers, and then Dom DeLuca's missing a tackle and the running back's going for 40 yards. It's like now it's, okay, let's go ahead and let Durant try to be disruptive, and maybe he can redirect the running back, and then, a safety can come up and make a play. So the defense has been better in that way. Really, I'd say since the Indiana game, I think they've actually played pretty well, and they've been much more aggressive. And I think they'll really try hard against kind of that offensive line with Rutgers. They'll try hard to get after Cali McManus.
Yeah, that's kind of like one of the key matchups that I think we both highlighted for this game, is that offensive line, defensive line battle is really going to be what determines it. But speaking of what determines it, it is time for some score predictions. I know we already did score predictions as a part of our as a part of our question and answer segment, but just to provide them on here, you would go ahead first.
Sure. I went 27-17. Interesting stat I didn't realize until I started talking to some other people on our board. Rutgers has not scored more than 10 points against Penn State since joining the Big Ten. So I would actually, I would say that ends this weekend. I think they'll find a way to score. Now, I don't know what the weather is going to be either. I don't know. A big snowstorm is kind of coming through the Midwest, so I'm not sure what's going to be there by Saturday afternoon. But I'll be intrigued to see weather because, like I said, it's Penn State Rutgers. It's always going to be cold and something. But I think as long as weather holds, I think Rutgers scores on Penn State. I do. I think they'll find a way. I think that passing game can get enough done. I think that even that running game, I think they'll be able to move the ball and score some points. I just think Penn State controls. I look at it a little bit like the Michigan State game. I think it's a 20-17 game, maybe going to the fourth, and maybe Penn State can put together. Penn State had a 9.5-minute drive that covered 80 yards, and they never threw a pass on that whole drive. So I think maybe Penn State can find a way to kind of grind out and do that. And again, I said 27-17. I think the spread is right around 9.5 or so. So I think Vegas maybe has it right, but at least in my eyes they do. But yeah, I think it's a really interesting game because I think both teams are really motivated. I did not picture Penn State being motivated a few weeks ago, and here they are playing for a bowl game and saying all the right things. And of course, I know Rutgers is going to be motivated with wanting to go to a bowl, having not beaten Penn State since joining the Big Ten, and clearly with Schiano's history, he wants to beat Penn State. This would be a flagship win for him.
Mm-hmm.
Arnav?
Yeah. Okay. I mean, I'm seeing the line went up from 10.5 to 13.5. I mean, I kind of think the same thing. I think Rutgers is going to be able to move the ball to an extent. They're going to be able to score it to an extent. It's probably going to be like something in the middle of like we've seen the two extremes. We've seen like an offense clicking and firing against Maryland, and we've seen them shut down against Ohio State. So it's probably going to be in the middle. I see them to be good for around 20, 21 points ish, maybe a little less, maybe a little more, but I don't know. Like I can't really see through that. The Rutgers run defense they just cannot stop the run, and that's without backs like Katron Allen and Nick Singleton that are probably much better than Maryland's run game, for example, and all the other ones that maybe Ohio State had some pretty good ones. But I think these guys, Bo Jackson and Isaiah West play pretty well, but these guys are different animals. The Penn State's offensive line's pretty good for them, but also just the way that they came out against Nebraska. The run game, I think, is going to help them control. On the other side of the ball, the O-line versus D-line matchup is key. But, I mean, that Penn State pass rush is kind of back to what I'm kind of used to seeing out of them, where they're like a ferocious pass rush. They can get after the quarterback. They can make run stops and like a fourth down. I think Rutgers just hang around, but I think Penn State ends up winning. I don't know if they cover or not, but I see it being maybe like, I want to go like 34-21 Penn State, something around that. But that Penn State probably pulls away like more so on the second half than the first half.
All right. Well, did you give like a score prediction, like a number?
Yeah, it said 34-21, didn't he?
Gotcha. Okay. Well, I guess I'm going to be the only one going positive for the viewers on our site here. We have to beat you eventually.
That's fair.
Play 100 times. We have to beat you eventually.
Yeah.
Don't tell Maryland that, though. I think it's happening twice. So anyway.
Fair enough, yeah.
Hey, you know what? Rutgers fans have more animosity towards Penn State than they do have towards Maryland.
Yeah, that's fair, I guess, too.
But I will say this game is going to come down to whichever team can drag the other one into the game they want to play. If Penn State can pull Rutgers into the mud and play this like ugly, low-scoring, run-the-ball type game, Penn State's going to pull off the victory. I think that Rutgers has the horses in the wide receiver room to force the game on Grunkmeyer's shoulders, which if that does happen, I think we can win if we force Grunkmeyer to be the playmaker, not Allen. So I'm going to go Rutgers takes the win 28-24.
I like it. I mean, it's good to have some optimism. I think you're right. I mean, I think if Rutgers can get Penn State into their style of football where it becomes a shootout, I think Rutgers is equipped this year with the receivers they have. And, Grunkemeyer is, with Penn State's receivers, put more pressure on him. Chances are maybe they make a mistake, or even if he doesn't, he's not able to find them, gets them off the field. Rutgers probably wins a high scoring game, but Penn State can run the ball and attack Rutgers where they're the weakest, I would say. And on the other side of the ball, if they can put pressure on Cadic Manis with that defensive line, I think those are the two matchups that for me swing the game towards Penn State. But we shall see tomorrow. I mean, the wait's almost over. It's probably the most anticipated game for Rutgers in probably a long, long time, and for Penn State too. I mean, I'm sure you're very excited to have that opportunity to end the season on a high note, clinch a bowl. So it should be a really good game. It's like it feels like it's like a playoff / rivalry atmosphere, which Rutgers, I feel like, just doesn't really get a lot. They haven't really had a clear-cut rival. Maryland, I guess, kind of, but this game, I think, is going to bring a lot more of that out, winner-take-all situation. And, yeah, I mean, it just probably just doesn't get bigger. I mean, unless you're competing for the playoffs and things like that. But for Rutgers, it probably just doesn't get bigger than this. And hopefully Scarlet Knights can come out with a win tomorrow and they can punch their ticket to the postseason. I mean, I think for Penn State, it's improbable to be in the spot. But for Rutgers, after the season they've had, it would also be improbable to complete the season with a win. But if they can, then hats off to them, I guess.
Yeah, man. So I did hear that the game has been announced as a sellout. The only tickets left are available on SeatGeek, so it should be a great atmosphere. But thank you, Brian, so much for joining us. Thank you, viewers, for tuning in to another episode of our podcast.
Yeah, I just want to say one thing really, really fast. I caught the basketball discussion you guys were having as I joined us in the waiting room. So Steve Pike will keep pounding nails, right? Just keep pounding nails. So hey. Penn State's open. Check out Penn State's Big Ten schedule sometime. I think they open up. They're at Indiana, Michigan State. I don't know, at Illinois. Like, if they're ranked and they're good and they're a tournament caliber team, Penn State's going to play them before the end of January. It's brutal. It's a brutal stretch. So we'll see what these two teams look like when they get to February.
When we started this season, we're in the middle of our 5-game stretch right now because the Players Era tournament, we had to go and play number 17 Tennessee. Then next game we get number 1 Purdue, and then Michigan right after, who's just been annihilating everybody. So the things aren't great over here either.
Right.
It's going to be a really fun year in Big Ten basketball. Probably just not for the two teams that we cover. So
yeah, pretty much. Like I was saying, like Michigan State, Indiana, like the top of the league looks very, very good. But I mean, Rutgers, I think, just got the short end of the stick because for the 1 week of conference play in the middle of the non-conference, having number 1 Purdue and then number 7 Michigan, who it might be number one and 2, like in whatever order, Michigan and Purdue now after feast week. But I mean, that's just gonna be one heck of a start. Those two teams are just like playing like national championship contenders, and then we get the rivalry game at Seton Hall, which will also be a fun one. So, but yeah, it's gonna be some rough basketball this season for Rutgers and Penn State.
Yeah, absolutely. But is that everything? You got everything?
I'm done now. I just had to bring up Steve Peichel. That's all I had to do. So I'm done.
I got you.
Yeah, like I don't know how much we're in love with Steve Peichel anymore. He did great things, but now it's like
fair enough. Yeah,
we'll see. But again, Brian, thank you so much for joining. Viewers, thank you for sticking with us for another hour and 20 minutes of us just rambling on about nonsense. Yeah, make sure to give us 5 stars on Spotify, Apple Music, subscribe to our YouTube. That always helps. Whatever you can, tell people about the pod. Definitely need to start pumping up a little bit more. But yeah, thank you guys so much for listening. And always remember that the bells must ring.